We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 42a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara brought the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer that there is no Chatzi Kofar. You don't pay half Kofar. Let's say a Tam kills a person. And we learned that out from the Pasuk of Ubal Hashur Naki. And the Gemara said that Rabbi Akiva responded to Rabbi Eliezer, and he said, of course you don't pay kofar. When it comes to a tam, you pay migufo. And in this case, the animal is chayiv misa, so what are you even going to pay with if you're going to give skila to the animal? And Rabbi Eliezer said, do you think that I'm talking about a scenario where you're putting the animal to death? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a scenario. There are scenarios where you don't put the animal to death. And the Gemara brought a couple different arguments, a couple different scenarios from Rabbi Eliezer. One scenario is, let's say the animal kills, is miskavin to kill an animal, then ends up killing a person. So in that situation, you're not going to put the animal to death. And so in that situation, Rabbi Eliezer has to learn from Ubal Hashor Naki again that there is no Chatzi Kofar. And then the other argument of Rabbi Eliezer was the weaker of the two arguments. That argument was that you're talking about a situation where the animal killed al pi eid echad. There was only one aid there that saw that the animal killed a person, or it was al pi habaylim. The bailim admitted that the animal had killed a person. That could also be a scenario where, again, the pasuk is saying pater mechatzi kofar. The problem with those arguments is al pi eid echad, really an eid echad can't be mechayiv money anyways. And with the hodas habaylim, if the owner admitted, you run into the problem of moed b'knas pater. So that was the weaker of the two arguments that Rabbi Eliezer forwarded. And the Gemara brought a machlokas hamoraim. Which argument was brought first? Did he bring the stronger argument first or the weaker one? And Rav Kahana said in the name of Rava that the stronger one was the one that was brought first. Why? Because it's a mashal to somebody who's trying to catch fish. Mishkach ravrei shakel, if he finds big ones, he takes those first. And then zutri shakel, that if he finds smaller ones, he takes those, meaning the bigger ones, the better argument that you're going to forward first. And Rashi explains, Mishkach Rav Rave Bereisha Shakelu, if he finds big fish first, he's going to take those. V'chiyadr Mishkach Zutre Shakel, then when he finds smaller ones, he'll take those. Hachanami here also, Afagav the Raya Gedola Amar Le Bereisha, even though over here he brought him a great Raya at first, Kihadr Mishkach Raya Zutrasi, when he found another Raya that was a little bit not as great of a Raya, Amar Nehila, he said that one as well. That's Rav Kahana's understanding. Rav Tevyume Mishmei de Rava Amar Hamis Amar Le Bereisha. Rav Tevyume, in the name of Rava, he says first he made the weaker arguments, again the argument that the animal killed al pi eid echad, or it was through the hodas habaylim, through the admission of the owner, and that's also mashal etzayin sheshol dagam and hayam. That would be a mashal to a fisherman who is catching fish from the sea. Mishkach zutre shakel, he finds smaller ones, he'll take those first. Mishkach ravrave, then if he finds bigger ones, shadi zutre, he throws aside the smaller ones. V'shakel ravrave, and he takes the bigger ones. Rashi says Mishkach zutre bereisha shakelu, if he finds the smaller ones first, he'll take those. Savar dilmalo mishkach achrini, because he thinks maybe I'm not going to find something else. But then when he finds the bigger ones, let's say he doesn't have let's say he doesn't have a vessel that can hold all of that, so therefore he'll throw away the smaller ones and he'll take the bigger ones. Hachanami here also, Hamis Amar Le Bereisha. First he made the argument of Hamis, that's the weaker argument. Dakati lo have yodale milsadat. Ifamine, he didn't yet know a better argument. Ki hadar mishkach ha hadar be mikamaisa. When he then found the better argument, so he retracted his first argument. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Idach, we learned in another brayso, Baal Hashor Naki. Again, the pasuk says Baal Hashor Naki. What do we learn from that? Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says Naki midmei valdus. What it means is he's innocent. He doesn't have to pay for the value. Let's say there was a loss of money of the vlad, meaning of the fetus. Rashi says midmei valdus means nagach eso isha v'yatzu yiladeh. Let's say the animal gored a woman and that caused a miscarriage, so you don't have to pay for that. That's what we learned from Baal Hashor Naki. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said back to him, to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Harehu Omer, but doesn't the pasuk already say ki yinatzu anoshim? The pasuk says, let's say men are fighting, v'nagfu isha hara. It says that they then push a woman who's pregnant. It causes a miscarriage, and we should darshan from there anoshim that you're going to make people, if they do it, then they have to pay. V'lo shavarim, but that's not true when it comes to oxen. And so we really learned that out already from the pasuk. What do you need to learn it out from the pasuk of Baal Hashor Naki for? And the Gemara says, Shaper Kamma Rabbi Akiva. Isn't Rabbi Akiva making a good argument? And the Gemara says, Amar Ravula Breid Ravidi, Ravula, the son of Ravidi, says, Itzrich, no, it is necessary to have the pasuk of Baal Hashor Naki, Sal Kadai Techamina, because I might think Anoshim Velo Shvarim Hadomin La Anoshim. I might think what it means is men and not oxen that are similar to men. Meaning, Ma Anoshim Muad and Av Shvarim Muad, and meaning when we're talking about a shore that's a muad, maybe only that is excluded. Hatam Mechai, but maybe I would think that a tam which is not similar to a person, because there's no concept of tam by a person, so maybe by a tam it would be chayiv when it comes to the Demei Valdus, Kasav Rachmana Bal Hashor Naki de Potter. That's why the pasuk writes Bal Hashor Naki to say Potter. Rashi explains, Ki notzu anashim v'nogfu ishahara. Again, that's the pasuk. Men are fighting and they cause this miscarriage. V'lo shvarim, men, and not oxen. And then the Gemara said, Af shvarim de pater lukra muadim hu de pater. When we say that shvarim are excluded, that's talking about if it's a muad. Avol tam and l'chayivu, but maybe you would think that tam should be chayiv. Kasav rachmanu bal hashor naki. That's why the pasuk writes of bal hashor naki. L'meimar de lo darshinan anashim v'lo shvarim. Hadom and lanashim. Don't make the drush in that fashion to exclude only oxen that are similar to men, only oxen that are muad. Elatam pater hu muad chayiv. Rather, on the contrary, says Rashi, a tam is going to be pater, and actually a muad is going to be chayiv. But the Gemara continues, Amar Rava, Rava says, Yatziva bi'ara v'giora b'shmei shmaya. Are you putting the citizen, he's on the earth, and the ger, the stranger, he's b'shmei shmaya, he's in the heavens, he has the higher status. Meaning what Rava is arguing is, how could you ever have even thought that ma'anoshim muadim af shvarim muadim, that a shor muad is pater, but you would have thought a tam is chayiv? Why would you think a tam is going to be more chayiv than a muad? That havamina doesn't even make any sense, that you would then need bal hashor naki to say that the tam is pater. So Ela Amar Rava, rather Rava says it goes as follows. Itzrich, we need the pasuk of Bala Ashur Naki for the following reason. Sal Gadai Techamina, I might think Anoshim v'lo Shvarim Hadomin la'Anoshim Ma Anoshim Muadin Af Shvarim Muadin v'Kal v'Chomer l'Tamin Deptiri. I might think that Anoshim and not oxen that are similar to Anoshim, meaning a Muad is going to be pater, and in that Havamina, not only a Muad would be pater, but of course a Tam would be pater as well from Demei Valdus. That's what I would have thought. Hadr Kasav Rachmana Bala Ashur Naki, and so then the pasuk writes Bala Ashur Naki to say it's only a Tam that's pater. Tam pater u muad chayiv, that a tam is pater and a muad is chayiv, as Rashi says, Kasav Rachmanu bal hashor naki l'meimar de lo darshinan anoshim v'lo shvarim hadom and lanoshim. Don't make that drasha and say that muad and tam are pater. Ela tam pater u muad chayiv, rather tam is pater and muad is chayiv. But the Gemara continues, Amar le Abaya. Abaya said to Rav, he said, according to that logic, Elameata, according to that, Gabe Boshes Nami Neimahachi. When it comes to Boshes as well, we should say your same kind of argument. We should say Anoshim v'lo shvarim hadom and lanoshim. We should say it applies to people and not to oxen that are similar to people. Ma Anoshim muadin af shvarim muadin, and therefore again, the kind of shore that will be excluded by Boshes, we'll see Rashi in a moment, will be a muad. The kal v'chomer l'tamin deptiri, and then we should say that it's a kal v'chomer by a tam that's also pater from Boshes, and then we should say Hadr Kasav Rachmana Bal Hashor Naki Tam Pater Umur Chayiv. We should say the same exact idea, that Bal Hashor Naki means that Tam is pater when it comes to Boshes and Muad is Chayiv. And Rashi explains Gabe Boshes Nami Dekaim Alon, because we've established the halach as follows: Shoro Shabiesh Pater. The halach in general is that if an ox causes a humiliation to a person, it's pater. V'nafkalon Mechiyinotzu Anoshim Yachtav Ish V'Yachiv V'Karva Eishes V'Gomer V'Katsosa as Kappa. When it talks about, again, there, we talk about a payment of Boshes in that exact same parsha of V'Chiyinotzu Anoshim we quoted above. The Hainu Boshes, again, it's talking about Boshes. It's talking about a situation there where the woman humiliated the person. So Neimahachi, so then we should say the exact same argument, and we should say this idea of Boshes, that it applies to a person and not to a shore, that's specifically coming to exclude a shore that is a muad, and a kal v'chomer to a tam also that would be excluded. But then Bal Hashor Naki says, don't make that drasha, and we should end up saying there that a tam is pater, but by a muad there would be a chiyuv of Boshes. If you're going to say, indeed, that is true, we do make the drush in exactly the same fashion and say a muad is chayiv in Boshes. So, but if that's true, if that were so, listening Bal Hashor Naki, what it should say is as follows in the Brisa. It should have said, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, that Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, Pater midmei valdus umi Boshes, that when we're talking about the patur over here, meaning from Bal Hashor Naki, it should be a double patur. It should be a patur from demei valdus, as we just said, and it should also be a patur from Boshes, because it's essentially the exact same drasha. Bal Hashor Naki should teach us that a tam is pater from both of those. And so the Gemara therefore says, Ela Abaya v'Rava dami tarvayu. Rather, Abaya and Rava, they both say as follows: Anoshim, that when it comes to men, when it comes to people, ein ason be'isha yeyanshu, then if there was no danger, if the woman didn't die from the struggle, then they're punished, and they have to pay for the demei valdus, they have to pay for the value of the miscarriage. But yesh ason be'isha, but let's say they ended up killing the woman, so then lo yeyanshu, so then they don't pay money because we apply the rule of kimle b'deravimine. That's true when it comes to people. V'lo shvarim, but that's not true when it comes to oxen. The avagav the yesh ason, even in a situation where the woman or the person was killed, yeyanshu, there still can be, when it comes to a situation of shvarim, they can still be punished, they can still pay money. That's the drasha that we would have made. Hadr kasav rachmana bal ashur naki, but then the pasuk writes bal ashur naki to pater, to say no, when it comes to the shvarim as well, in a situation where there is asun, in a situation where the person dies, there's going to be a ptur from paying money. And Rashi explains that Abaye v'Rava da'amri tarvayu, rather Abaye and Rava, they both say as follows: Lahachi itzrich, this is the reason why we need the pasuk of Bal Ashur Naki, the Rabbi Akiva, because if we only had the teaching of Rabbi Akiva, Hava Amina Anoshim v'lo Shvarim Hachi Medrash, I would have said to make the drush of Anoshim and not Shvarim as follows: Anoshim hu dechiyesh ason biisha lo yeyanshu b'dmei valdus. I would say that when it comes to people, if again the woman dies, so then they're not punished, they don't have to pay for the value of the fetus, to kamle b'derabmine, because we have the rule of kamle b'derabmine. Once they're getting the death penalty, they don't pay money. Avol shvar, but when it comes to oxen, I might have said afilu yeshason yeyanshu b'dmei valdus. Even if the woman dies, there should be a punishment in terms of paying money for the vlad, the leka b'chiv misa, because there is no chiv misa. So I would have thought that you have to pay money in that case. So kasav rachmana v'chulu. That's why the pasuk writes again. That's why it says bal ashur naki, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili. But the Gemara still doesn't like this answer. Maskef la Ravada Barava. Ravada Barava asks, Atu ba'asan talya milsa. Is it really dependent on whether the woman was killed? Bekavana talya milsa. It really should be dependent on kavana, on the intention. And Rashi explains, Atu ba'asan talya milsa, bekavana talya milsa. Do you think it's dependent on whether the person's killed? Isn't it really dependent on kavana? Meaning, v'afilu yesh asan be'isha. What he's asking is as follows: even in a scenario where there is asan by the woman, where the woman does die, there is a situation where you're going to have to pay money. Im niskavin lechavero, let's say, for example, the person would have kavana that he didn't want to kill the woman, he wanted to actually hit the other individual, he wanted to hit his friend. To svira leila Ravada, the point over here is that Ravada holds Rabbi Shimon, he holds like the sheet of Rabbi Shimon. The Yomar b'Meseches Sanhedrin, the Rabbi Shimon says in Meseches Sanhedrin, be'elohen ha-nisrafin, in Perak Elohen ha-nisrafin, nisgavin laharog hazeh v'harog hazeh pater mimisa v'chayev mammon. In a case where a person has intention to kill one person, ends up killing another person, so there's a p'tur from misa, there's no death penalty, and there is a chiv to pay the monetary payment, the monetary damages. V'les lei the Tana de Vechizkiya. The point is that Rabbi Shimon does not hold of Tana de Vechizkiya, because Tana de Vechizkiya, Da'amar Tana de Vechizkiya, they say lo chilakta bo ben miskavin l'shein miskavin l'chayv mammon el lepotra mammon. They say it doesn't matter whether there's kavana, whether there's no kavana. You're not going to be chayiv to pay money in either case. You're always going to be pater according to Tana de Vechizkiya. That's not what Rabbi Shimon holds, and again, that's not what Rav Ada Barava over here holds. V'lo yasun dekra bechavero kadarish le, and so therefore, when it says v'lo yasun, which is talking about the person, you darshan as follows: Imein asun bechavero afilu yesh asun biisha, meaning if the person that the person that the individual was trying to hit, if he doesn't die, but there is the woman, she actually does die, so then yayanesh, in that situation, the person is going to be punished, the person is going to have to pay mammon. That's the sheet of Rabbi Shimon, that's Rav Ada Barava, that's what he's asking based on. In other words, according to the way they understand the pasuk, there is going to be the punishment of paying for Dmei Valdus. Let's say this one man ends up killing the woman because he's trying to kill the other person he's fighting with, and instead he ends up killing the woman. So we say over there that there is going to be a monetary payment. And since when it comes to people, even in a situation where she dies, there's going to be a monetary payment, again following Rabbi Shimon. And it comes out that if we're applying that to people and we're saying only people and not shavarim, not oxen, then it comes out actually that when it comes to the animals, it doesn't matter whether the person dies or doesn't die. Actually, on the contrary, there is going to be no payment in that situation. So we already know there's no payment, because again, by people there's a payment in all situations, and we exclude shvarim from that payment. Ubal ashur naki lamali, and so therefore we're back to our original question: why does Rabbi Yossi Aglili need ubal ashur naki? And so the Gemara continues, Elamar Avad Barava, rather Avad Barava says, Anoshim, that when it comes to people, Kiniskavnu Zelazeh, when they have intention, these two men are fighting with one another, and again, then this woman steps in, she's the wife of one of the men, so Afal Gav Sheyesh Asun Biisha Yeyanshu. Even though the woman ends up dying, there's still, as we said, there's a monetary payment. That's what Avad Barava says, following in the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Kiniskavnu Liisha Atzma, however, if they would have kavanah to hit the woman, Lo Yeyanshu, so then there would be Kamle B'derab Minei, and there would be no monetary payment. Velo shvarim, and in that halacha, in that specific detail of the halacha, we say that doesn't apply to oxen. Tiafilu niskavnu isha atzma yanshu, that there, even if there was intention for the woman, when it comes to the shore, we're going to say there is going to be a monetary payment, or you might have thought that. Kasav rachmana bala shor naki, and that's why the pasuk writes bala shor naki to P'tiri, to say that it's pater in that situation. Again, that's really why Rabbi Yossi Aglili is using, that's what he's using a bala shor naki for. That's how he responds to Rabbi Akiva's argument, because again, Rabbi Akiva's argument was it should be pater anyhow. There's no need for bala shor naki, because we say it only applies to people and not to animals. And the Gemara continues, V'chein ki yasser Rav Chagi midroma, and similarly when Rav Chagi came from the south, asa vayzi masnisa b'yadeh, he came, he brought with him a brisa, kivasei de Ravada bar Rava, following the logic over here of Ravada bar Rava. And the Gemara continues, Tan Yidach, we learned in another brisa, another limit for Baal HaShor Naki. What does it mean in the pasuk Baal HaShor Naki? What does it mean that the owner of the ox is innocent? Rabbi Akiva says, Naki midmei eved. What it means to say is, it's Naki, it's innocent in terms of paying for the eved, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Beis Amud Beis.